Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 26 of the Inking Out Loud podcast. The subject for discussion today, of course, is the final third of Robert Jackson Bennett's Foundryside. I'm your host, as usual, Rob Santos, and joining me again is my co-host, Drew McCaffrey.
How's it going, everybody?
Drew, my dude, Foundryside. Any opening thoughts?
I'm trying to kind of.
Oh, really? You sound really excited about this one.
So I am excited about it. I will say I am excited.
Okay.
It's a book that I enjoyed reading, and there are aspects of it that I really loved. But I think overall, I maybe should have enjoyed it more than I did. It's kind of a weird mindset that I have coming out of the book.
Ambivalent, would you say?
Not ambivalent. Like, I did enjoy it. But I enjoyed it less at the end than I did, at the end of part 2, where we left off last week. I think it's simply... I think Bennett failed to fully execute a really, really ambitious plan with this book. There were a lot of twists, a lot of turns, a lot of what should have been surprises, and I feel like I predicted almost all of them way early in the book, and thus it kind of failed to land. I mean, just thinking back to our episode last week, how many of the predictions that we brought up,
I have a whole point about that.
Like,
in my opener, pretty much. And I agree basically with pretty much everything that you just said. I feel like Bennett was being, I don't know, I think his eyes were a little bigger than his stomach, if that's how I want to put it. I think what he attempted to do with this first volume is that he attempted to get this huge groundwork planned, and it just, to me, it felt very convoluted, it felt very confusing, long-winded in some parts. I did enjoy. There were lots of parts in this book that I straight up enjoyed, like hands down. I do have a lot to promote concerning this book, but overall, I mean, the amount of predictions that we made, like you just mentioned, that came true. Things that I feel like should have been surprises and just straight up, at the point of revelation was like, yeah, of course, I don't know. Overall, I am feeling pretty ambivalent about this book. I did enjoy it, but there were a lot of parts where I got really frustrated. And now, of course, I'll be discussing that, much more throughout the course of this particular episode.
Yeah. It's... I feel like if Bennett simply tried to do a little less in this book, he would have pulled it off better. There were just so many of those things that he wanted to make surprises that he didn't really have room to adequately develop all of them, I think. Like there were certain things, like for instance, Sanchia and Berenice, right? We picked up on that. We both noticed that. But there was like one hint, right, in the first half of the book.
Do you think it's because we're just so good at what we do by now? It might be.
I mean, we're pretty astute readers, both of us. We have a lot of practice reading books like this, and so when Sanchia and Berenice start, coming a little more forward in their interest, it's not surprising. And but even more than that, like the culminating moment of it, right, where they finally kiss, and Sanchia has this kind of moment of catharsis where that's like her first real chance to be physically intimate with another human being without the torture of her scribings. And I felt like that didn't land with all the impact it could have, because he was so busy earlier in the book concentrating on setting up all of these different things. There wasn't a whole lot of oomph built up behind this idea that Sanchia can't touch other people. it was mentioned like maybe once or twice, but it was just mentioned offhandedly. It wasn't accompanied by any
Right.
sort of real emotion or real impact in those moments. So when the impact is supposed to land here at the end, it felt more like a flick than a punch,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Okay, I agree with that. I do think that drawing, harkening back really quickly to a book we did previous. Oh, you know what? That actually might be. No, never mind. I'm not going to mention that.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, no, because I figured
I
that
think I
could
know what you were gonna
still
say,
be kind of a.
but-
There was another very similar moment in a book that we just did recently that I felt was handled a lot better. That had a lot more weight to it, to use your terminology, a lot more oomph to it, definitely. This one, I was waiting for it, and when it finally happened, it was kind of, I don't want to say anticlimactic, because I was still, pretty excited about it, but you're right, there was just so much happening at the time, and there wasn't really a whole lot of build-up to it in the chapters previously, in the novel previously. There was, like you said, very, very subtle hints, or maybe just one or two hints, but that was a very, very, very important moment for Sanche that I felt just kind of got like swept under the rug immediately. So I don't know. That's one of the reasons that I'm kind of feeling a little, I don't know, about the overall impact of this book and how it had on me. But
Yeah, so,
go ahead.
and again, I think I mentioned this in the first episode on Foundryside. Excuse me. How, in a lot of ways, this book reminded me, like, stylistically of Brandon Sanderson, and it fell kind of in this, like, middle ground between, like, the tone of Scott Lynch's Gentlemen Bastards
Yeah.
and the tone of, like, Sanderson's Mistborn or Warbreaker. And I mentioned how I expected there to be what is essentially a Sanderson avalanche in the second half of this book, and there very much was. right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're talking about how many different twists and turns and surprises and whatever.
Yep, the very short viewpoints, the repeat. Yeah.
Because it felt like at the end of part 2 that should have been around halfway through the book, but really it was closer to like 70%.
Yeah.
And basically from the get-go, all of part 3 was the climax. That was our Sanderson avalanche, for lack of a better term here. But it also felt to me like, a Sanderson avalanche that was not written by Brandon Sanderson. That
Fair enough. Fair enough.
It wasn't as deftly handled as I think Sanderson has, developed his climaxes. It felt a little all over the place. It was a little messy. Everything didn't quite fit together in that really, really satisfying way that we'll get in books like Words of Radiance or Oathbringer or The Bands of Mourning or something like that. So at the same time, though, I'm not going to say that it wasn't satisfying, because aspects of it were. I think for me, what I enjoyed the most here was the way he built up the lore and the history of this world, and is slowly bringing that out, especially by the end when we have Valeria released and we know much more about how the Hierophants worked and how their scrivings operated with the the human sacrifice and all of that, and then we have this final reveal that was maybe surprising, maybe not so surprising, in part 4 of this Dark Prophet, the Moth guy.
Yeah.
Who by the way is totally Cressides, right?
Oh, I hadn't considered that. I can't
that was,
believe
like,
I
the
hadn't
first
considered
thing-
that.
That was like the first thing that came to my mind there. I was like, this is totally him, right?
Why did I
Like,
not consider that? Yeah. Huh. Oh well.
Because he's got like the flowing
Well,
cloth wrappings.
It's got the black
and-
cloth wrappings, like a mummified corpse. It's like all
Yeah.
he's made of moths that are constantly like making up his form, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we had like Clef's memory of
Oh,
Cressides,
that's
like,
right.
turning
Opening
out
the
sun
casket
or the stars,
yeah,
and
the box. That's right.
and he's wearing like the cloth wrappings and yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, not in retrospect, actually, I had all the pieces. They just hadn't been assembled yet. Huh. But yeah, and I'll respond to your previous point there by agreeing for the most part. I just like with what you said about how it definitely read a bit like a Sanderson Avalanche that wasn't written by Brandon Sanderson. I agree, and I agree again that it wasn't as deftly handled as I would have hoped for. But I also want to offer a bit of context, I suppose. I mean, this is Bennett. It's not his debut novel. He does have some experience, but he's not quite as accomplished. He's not quite as experienced, I would say, as Brandon Sanderson is. And if you think about it, I would say that this sort of Avalanche, if that's the term I want to use here, did kind of feel a little more like that of, say, Elantris, back when Brandon Sanderson wasn't quite as practiced at his craft. But yeah, no,
but a lot more ambitious in execution.
Yeah,
than
Sanderson knew.
Elantris,
I feel like Sanderson knew exactly what he was going for way before he started with Elantris, and he wasn't trying to cram too much into Elantris. We pretty much had everything answered that we wanted to know, with the exception of a couple big mysteries. But the way that Bennett left this book off, I feel like we really haven't even scratched the surface of the deep lore, regardless of how much of it we've been given a glimpse of so far. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that particular aspect of it. I like that there's a lot left, presumably a lot left unexplored that we're going to get to dig into in future books. Again, I'm going to draw it back to Scott Lynch and what he's done with the Eldrin and the ancient history of his world there, versus the Occidentals and the Hierophants and the ancient history of Bennett's world here. When you think about, actually no, I'm not gonna go into detail because you haven't read all of Lies of Locke Lamora, have you?
No, I've read like the first half. Yeah. No, first 2/3 of Lies of Locke Lamora.
But at least the basic layout there, it's one
all
of the things
I remember out of that
early chapters there.
Some dude and the word Via Camorazza repeated over and over and over and over again. But
you got a lot more than just a couple chapters.
I did. Nice bird ass. I did.
Yeah. Anyway, I keep drawing this parallel between Foundryside and Gentleman Bastards.
That's good because
I feel like the world is built up.
Really
and
need to stop
mystery,
comparing to Sanderson. Yeah.
It's like the mystery in the lore, and I think we have a pretty good grounding in that to kick us off in Foundryside going forward in this trilogy. I loved that we got that scene toward the end with Clef, with the original Clef.
Yeah. Okay.
The man. I am simultaneously baffled by and intrigued by Valeria, the editor. This artificial god, angel, whatever devil you want to call it. I think there's awesome stuff to come there. And I do like the way he set up the second book at the end, where we have essentially like a really multifaceted conflict coming up. We have Orso and Sanchia and Berenice and all them with their new founded house.
Yeah.
We have the Dandolo interests with Ophelia and this dark prophet. We have a conflict with Gregor. We don't really know what his deal is going to be going forward. We don't know how he's going to fully recover or react to the events that
Yeah.
We still have Valeria is kind of an antagonist, kind of maybe on Sanchia's side because she owes
she's
Sanchia
definitely
something.
A wild card at the moment, isn't she?
Yeah, and then we of course have just the general Tavan culture and the issues, the inequalities, the anarchy, the barely controlled anarchy, I should say. There's a lot to explore over the next 2 books, right? This is supposed to be a trilogy?
Yeah, I think I read it was supposed to be a trilogy, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I'm 90% certain on that one.
Okay. I like the way this book left off in relation to what the second book can be. I'm just not totally enamored by the way Bennett wrapped up everything in this book.
Well, I'll take that point one step further, actually. Even though it's supposed to be, supposedly supposed to be a trilogy, the amount of lore that we get, it feels like this is the start of a 10-book series, and I don't know how we're going to get quite everything wrapped up, because, again, we really haven't even done much more than scratch the surface of the deep lore, concerning the Occidentals, the Hierophants, and Cressides, and I mean, I personally want to know more about, Tribuno Candiano's madness and exactly what the hell is happening there. There's so much more to happen that it doesn't feel like the first third. It feels like the first 10th. And I can only see that being a problem going forward, unless Bennett has something genius planned. And he might. I have to give it to him. I mean, he might have the perfect plan going forward. But as this book left me, I'm still kind of reeling a little bit. I'm satisfied in a lot of ways, but I'm still kind of just straight up confused.
Yeah, that's fair, and I think it's a justified worry to bring into the second book. Knowing how he wrapped up such a convoluted, complex plot in the first book, and seeing how much more complex it could potentially get over the next 2 books, how effectively will he be able to wrap it all up by the end of the third?
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe he'll extend it to more than 3. I mean, Sanderson's infamous for doing stuff like that, right?
Is Sanderson infamous?
I mean,
like that's more
let's take
Jordan,
Mistborn
George R. R.
Era 2, for example. That was supposed to be a novella, which turned into a trilogy, which turned into 4 books. Because when he announced book 2 was done, he was like, "Oh, by the way, I wrote book 3 as well, and there's going to be a book 4."
That's one thing.
That started off as a novella, though. I mean, that's just, I don't know. I feel like that's just the mark of somebody who's too damn creative for their own good.
I mean, I don't identify that with Brandon Sanderson so much as like George R. R. Martin, Robert Jordan.
Oh, I mean,
guys
those
who
are
like,
stellar examples right there. Yeah.
They planned something as a trilogy and it turned into a 14-book series or a 7, maybe 7.
As much as I love Robert Jordan, I will have to say, I mean, who knows? That could have turned into a 20-book series.
Oh, I mean, I don't. We'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get
much
into
more. In just a couple of weeks here, in fact.
You never know. Actually, you do know, because we will tell you soon.
Yeah, I mean, we've already been posting on social media
I suppose.
about that. So.
And by the time this comes out, we'll be much more public with that. Yeah, no. Okay, makes sense.
But anyway, this is it's not something I expect Bennett to just be like, oh yeah, by the way, this is going to be a 5-book series or something. I do think we're going to be looking at a trilogy here. I do think that he's going to wrap it up as best he can. But let's kind of move on from this high level and let's dig into the characters a little bit.
Cool. Sanchia.
I like her less in the second half than I did in the first half.
Okay.
I think it was cool how Valeria edited her scribings and turned her into an editor herself. I think that gives us a lot of opportunity for new things, but I also it makes her less interesting to me. Her biggest conflict, I felt like internal conflict, has just been solved. She doesn't have to deal with this. She has an on-off switch now. Yeah. Right? Like, and she doesn't have the object empathy anymore, so she can just her biggest internal struggles in this book were the scriving's effects upon her and her self-identity as a slave, and she overcame both of those. One of them a lot more easier than the other. Easily.
I was thinking about stopping there, but I was like, nah, I'm letting it continue.
But because of that, I'm like, I don't know, I'm less engaged. I still like her, but I'm less engaged with her character going forward. I think Orso and Berenice and Gregor, especially Gregor, have way more interesting things ahead of them than Sanchia.
Wow.
And so Sanchia here, like, she had some really really fun moments in the second half. Going into, the mountain and talking to the mountain, I had a lot of fun with that.
Mm-hmm.
These conversations that she has with these scribed personalities are a really nice touch that Bennett brought in. But I just don't. In the end, I'm not as interested in Sanchia as I was midway through the book.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to take that point that you just offered me, and I'm going to completely disagree with it.
Ooh.
I will start off by saying I immensely appreciated Sanchia's journey through the latter half of this book. As you were just talking about, like Valeria's supposition that Sanchia is a slave to her scribing because she views herself as a slave, if not an outright object. That presented a huge obstacle for her. It revealed a big obstacle to her, and one that had been disguised as simply part of who she was. And I thought that presented an excellent moral dilemma for our protagonist, and it kind of, ultimately showed her the path to that sort of self-actualization that she had been lacking up until this point. And I thought Bennett handled that part really well.
Okay, I want to...
No, go ahead.
Get some clarity on what you mean by...
Sure.
Her identity as a slave to her scribing.
Well, that's...
And what exactly that entailed.
Okay, so Valeria made the point to her that she can be controlled through her scribing by the Imperiat because she views herself as a slave.
Yes.
And that was why she was a slave to the Imperiat. So right away in that moment, I was thinking, oh, okay, so a big climax is going to happen in this book, or maybe in another book, probably in this book, where she has to overcome the Imperiat by changing how she views herself, by accepting the fact that she is not a slave, and that this obstacle will be overcome. And by the way, that was a point I thought in Valeria's favor. At the beginning, I started to trust Valeria, despite the fact.
We'll get to Valeria in a bit.
Oh, but I have more to go on after that too. Yeah, when we get to Valeria, I will definitely expound. Is that a word? Whatever upon that point.
Expound.
So, but there was the scene where Sanchia escapes from the abandoned foundry. She returns to, and I want to say this because this was something I found interesting. Something I guess about my I was going to say comprehension, but I'll say lack thereof. Up until this point, something I hadn't realized. So she escapes from the abandoned foundry. She returns to Orso and Berenice. She's covered in blood and sewage and everything. Sorry. And we get her full name, Grado. And I was confused in that moment because I didn't remember ever reading it before. I mean, granted, I was, like I said in the last podcast, my previous half.
Have it.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with this. My previous half was all done through audio. I didn't remember ever getting her last name, so I opened the search in book function on my e-reader, since the entire second half was done, via text, and I entered her last name, and it turns out that was the 4th time we got it. You had it once in chapter 1, once in chapter 8, once in chapter 17, and then that time in chapter 33. And I just want to say, what a useful thing the e-reader is. I mean, it really is the future, folks. There's no other way to read, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, I'm gonna disagree with you.
I mean, it's great to have the collection, and I will still continue to buy the physical copies of every book that authors release that I really, really love. Brandon Sanderson. I'll probably get Doors of Stone when Rothfuss finally gets off his ass and publishes that one. But it's just, the e-reader is just, that's how I will be primarily consuming the content, regardless of the fact that I have the physicals and I have the audiobooks. The e-reader is just so goddamn convenient. It really is.
So I mean, to piggyback on this tangent here.
Sure.
You can rip my hardcover Foundryside right here out of my cold dead hands. But
okay.
I will always vastly prefer reading a book with a hard copy of it. But I do also tend to buy ebooks, of books I already own in a physical format. So on rereads and on, deeper analysis and things, especially now that I'm writing for Tor.com and I'm working on real literary essays for science fiction and fantasy stuff, it is easy to have a very searchable format.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can just hit the search function and
you can't beat the convenience of having the e-reader with you, being able to do all this stuff that search in book function, and not just putting aside the fact that you can carry your entire library with you wherever you go for A half of a pound fits in one pocket. Of course, you could say that about music too, but yeah.
But anyway, back to
Sanchia.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say, like, I enjoyed the slave freedom internal conflict she had. It was more the scriving, the side effects of her scriving. That conflict, I felt, was one of the things that defined her character. And then it was just totally ripped away, and so she feels like a completely different character now in a lot of ways, because she doesn't have,
but
like it wasn't earned growth; it was just given to her.
I don't know. I would argue that, like, see, that particular aspect of her personality is a weakness. It presents a weakness to her, or at least she interprets it as a weakness. And is one truly defined by their weakness or by their strengths? I don't know. I felt like this was a burden that she had to shed all along, and that I'm kind of glad that we got something in that way in book one, or else it would have felt, to me, this entire book would have felt kind of less important, because, I mean, there's still just so much left to uncover. I felt like we needed something big, some pivotal change in Sanchia's life, and I think this was a good way to do it.
I mean, fair enough. I
agree to disagree.
I disagree.
Yeah, that's fine. That's exactly why we make podcasts like this. You offer differing opinions. Exactly.
And I'd like to just point out that the books we've disagreed the most on have been the brand new books that neither of us have ever read before.
Yeah, which is good. Well, I mean, if we disagreed so much about Brandon Sanderson, we might not have vibed so well up until this point, right?
or the Wheel of Time, or whatever.
The Wheel of Time, music and stuff. Halo, you know, yeah.
But yeah, you know, there's definitely like a character arc. You know, we have a conclusion with Sanchia with her internal conflicts. I just don't really feel like one of those conclusions was earned.
Okay.
And that's my issue.
Okay. You feel like it was kind of just, it came and went non-consequentially. She didn't really have to change herself so much as she just had this removed for her.
Yes.
Okay, I agree with that, actually. You know what, now that you mentioned that, I mean, Valeria was kind of like a cheat card in that moment, wasn't she? Mm-hmm. But I don't know, going forward with Sanchia's new abilities, I'm just so excited about what's going to happen with those. There's so much more that she can do. You said you preferred Sanchia in the first half of the book. I vastly preferred her in the second half of the book.
Really?
If only because... I mean, it's not only because, but if only because in itself would be enough reason, with how much potential she has going forward with a lot of the new abilities she's acquired and a lot of the weaknesses she's had removed. The ball and chain has been cut, proverbially speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I am not going to deny the cool factor has been ratcheted up.
And then maybe that's all it takes to please me, I'll admit that. Who knows?
Yeah. And I will say my hope for Sanchia going forward, that like, if we're going to have this internal conflict renewed, perhaps, it's that Valeria is the one who edited her, right? Ooh. And Valeria has some antagonistic tendencies where we're left at the end of the book. She could further edit Sanchia.
Dang, I hadn't considered that.
So, that's my hope. As much as it's going to suck if she does, that's my hope.
Do you think Sanchia could return the favor? Could fire back, perhaps, if she gets good enough?
She is an editor.
She is an editor, right? Who knows? Yeah. I mean, she was created... I mean, we found out later in the book, of course, that this mysterious black figure in all this cloth and all these, you know, things was perhaps involved in her creation. Or was it Gregor's creation? I think it was Gregor's creation.
Gregor's creation.
Sorry,
yeah,
I was
definitely
going off on a misled tangent there. But, you know, I mean, this figure that you are predicting to be Cressides the Great, and that I might be tempted to actually jump on that bandwagon, was involved with the scriving of humans. Might, you know, there might be another hidden secret there. Maybe he had a reason for that. I'm assuming he had a reason for that, but who knows what that reason could be. I don't think she's as helpless.
Shall we use this as a jumping off point and go into Gregor?
Boom! Perfect. Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll start us off, and I'll start off by saying it looks like we had a couple of predictions about Senor Gregor that came true, eh?
It does indeed look that way.
Pardon me. He is a scribed human as well, bingo, ding ding, and he's effectively immortal. And his mother knows that, and she's behind it all. Sorry, go ahead.
And it's an Occidental scribing.
Yes.
As I predicted.
Yeah.
All of our predictions about Gregor at the end of last episode came exactly true.
Yep. And I'm torn on whether I think the book is less for it or we are just really, really badass. I don't know. I feel like a lot of people could have got that.
Our listeners,
a lot of
comments
people
on our
talked to could have got that. Yeah.
Comments on our posts, on Facebook and in the Yanking Out Loud Facebook group, and let us know what you thought about that. If you predicted what was going on with Gregor, or if you were surprised by it, or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I mean, I'm really curious to see if this is a common thing with Foundryside. if these surprises are just as obvious as like the Sanchi and Berenice thing, and Ophelia and Gregor and the Scribings, and the other one. I don't remember if we mentioned it or not, but that Clef was Cressidi's wand.
Yeah, I think we did.
Yeah, that was super obvious, right?
Right, it was I mean, listen to me stuttering, Jesus Christ. One of my predictions at the end of the last episode was that we had seen the wand and it's just in disguise. And in that moment I was wondering, do I say it's Clef? But I think you actually just expounded upon that before I even did. So
yeah, I mean, we haven't listened back on our editing isn't done yet on that episode, so I don't remember exactly what all the predictions were, but I my vague memory is that we just nailed everything.
Yeah, I don't know. But that said, since we're still on Gregor's character, I will say I was actually pretty disappointed with his treatment for the latter half of this book. He's just sort of I don't want to say non-consequential, because he convinces Sanchia to make the strike on the mountain, but after that he just spends most of the narrative kind of, for lack of a better term, trapped inside the prison of his own body. And it was cool to see him Hulk smashing his way into the Campo, but I felt really cheated out of the fight that I wanted to see in this character. And I don't know, I suppose what I was expecting was something more along the lines of a gathering of his continually failed militia and a full frontal assault on the Campo in order to save Sanchia. That's what I was kind of expecting. And then finally he kind of gets to prove to his mother, look, my militia, this thing that we stand for is legitimate, and we can accomplish something when we really, really try. But I suppose if that had happened and he had done that, maybe it would have led to a complicated sort of romance, though. I don't know. But I don't know. It did not go the direction I expected it to, and I felt like I just liked that character so much. I hated seeing him a prisoner for that entire second half, despite how cool it was.
Yeah, and so to bring this into the writing language,
sure.
The problem with Gregor in the second half of this book is that he's utterly robbed of agency.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's built up to have this character arc and this conflict where he's working
self-actualized, yes.
He's working to make a difference in the city, like a civic duty kind of thing. And then in the second half of this book, it's that whole plot thread is just chopped in half and stops.
Well, and he's suspended, perhaps.
Tool.
He might still further it in the future.
I imagine he will, but that's an unfulfilled character arc. He doesn't have a full character arc in this book.
Oh, definitely.
He just loses agency for the last 180 pages of the book.
Uh-huh.
And that's a problem for me.
Yep.
Especially because he's such a likable character.
I was going to say, he was my favorite character he was my second favorite character.
Yeah. I will say, again, the cool factor is there. Mm-hmm. This Lorica, the shadow assassin Lorica, where he's got the ridiculous, extending pole arm and the shield
that shoots
Espringal
projectiles and stuff.
Combo and
jumping 30 feet in the air. That was cool.
Yeah, the cool factor was definitely ramped up in the second half of this book. But with Sanchia, but even more so than Sanchia, I was not satisfied with his character arc.
No, definitely.
His character arc just stopped.
And he just at one point he just stopped becoming a character and became a device. a narrative device.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, like, I have hope. I really want him to be brought into the fold with this new Foundryside Limited, merchant house. I want him to have more of an opportunity to work on his, like, civic police, reforming the political structure of the government of Tavan. I think there's potential going forward for him, but his character arc in the second half of this book fell flat.
I want to make a pseudo prediction going forward before we get off of Gregor and before I forget it.
Okay.
I do think that there is still some potential for a love triangle, if that's the phrase you want to use, between he, Berenice, and Sanchia. But I think that's only because, not like they've been vibing at all up until this point, not like Sanchia and Berenice have been clearly, but because of what they have in common, and that is the fact that they are both scribed humans, he and Sanchia, and they are both scribed with Occidental symbols. And I think there's a lot of narrative potential for Bennett to explore perhaps a journey, like a quest for those two to go on to find out answers, and in doing so encounter a lot of scenarios and situations where they will grow closer together. I think that's possible going forward.
I'm gonna go ahead and say they will not be romantically involved.
Okay, you're okay.
But I agree with everything else you just said there.
They might not be romantically involved, but it might give Sanchia some doubts until she decides on Berenice. I don't think for a moment she will ever end up with Gregor, but I think it will kind of present some confusion when she finds out how much they have in common, and I don't really see Gregor going anywhere else except into that territory himself and being rejected, unfortunately. That's what I think, maybe.
So you think Sanchia is bisexual?
Yeah. I think she could be.
Okay.
I think there's a chance, definitely a good chance that she is. I mean, we know for a fact that she obviously does have a very clear interest in Berenice. She expresses that several times. Very, very clearly. And of course, Berenice reciprocates that. But at the same time, the amount that they have in common, not she and Berenice, but she and Gregor, in the fact that they are both scribed human beings, they will either become, they will become like close to best friends, I think, just because of how much they have in common. But I ultimately assume, of course, that Sanchia and Berenice is the clear way to go. I mean,
I just see it as like I don't think there's the need to make any kind of romantic interest a part of the relationship growing between them. Like,
sure, it could, yeah.
Yes, they're both scribed humans. Yes, they will have this eventual relationship growing closer together and will understand each other in ways that other people can't.
Yeah.
But I just don't see any precursor for romance there.
And I think I want to just point again that I did say, this is a pseudo prediction. I didn't give this any thought. This was an impulsive prediction that I just made here. Not like the predictions that I have later for the episode where I have at least had a few days to give them some thought. So, yeah.
Okay.
Are we done with Gregor, or do you have more that you want to discuss?
The only thing I have left with Gregor is that he, like, as much as he was robbed of agency in the second half of this book, and his character arc was cut short, he is set up for a more compelling character arc in the second, because he still has this whole, like, police force reform, revolution, possibly, conflict ahead of him, but now he has a direct and immediate conflict with his mother.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of potential there. I think Ophelia was one of the better, like, secondary characters in this book.
Yeah, I agree.
She's compelling. She's not going to say mysterious, but she's good at obfuscation. It's hard to get a handle on her. That was one of those things that maybe landed a little better with me, was the gradual reveal of what exactly Ophelia is up to.
Was it? I don't know. I kind of saw that coming. Like, as soon as she was telling Gregor, she's like, I knew you were alive. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I know you're not going to die. And I was like,
Well,
oh, okay, so she's behind this. She's scribing humans. She knows that he's immortal.
But that wasn't
are you referring
the
to her
whole...
connection with...
I'm saying her whole motivation. We got bits and pieces strewn throughout the book with her, and in
motivation
a pretty...
for what? Sorry.
That she's working with a Hierophant.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, I thought you were talking about her motivation for scribing humans and the fact that she's created one. I was like, that's pretty obvious.
That's
she
just
lost her husband
that's
and
just
her son.
a small piece.
Oh,
of it.
okay, yeah, I got you.
So, yeah. So, like, Ophelia is kind of my offshoot of Gregor. Like, I'm very interested in what she's up to. I think she's going to be a fantastic antagonist going forward. I think she's immediately more compelling than either Tomas or Estelle were in this book. Yeah.
Really? I agree with one of those names. I disagree with the other.
You disagree with Estelle?
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, we actually still have a lot of characters. I have points here. Orso, Berenice, Estelle, Ziani, Clef, Valeria. Holy crap.
No, this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode.
It might be, yeah. So, yeah, who do you want to move on to next, my man?
Let's talk about Estelle.
All right. I mean, that's a good jumping off point. Yeah. I will start off by saying, and this is something I actually wrote down word for word in my notes. I wrote, damn, Estelle knows how to make an entrance. And I'll justify that here. Those little scribed pieces sound horrible. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've had big drops of liquid steel drop into my boot on occasion, and it sucks to the max. I mean, generally speaking, since the boots are tied on so well to prevent exactly that from happening, it means that when the hot steel does find its way in there's not much to be done about it besides just kind of screaming and stamping my foot and trying to rub it out. I can't imagine what it would be like to have that same drop of hot steel moving through my body and eating the lining around my heart. I was like, oh, just wow, this is a cold bitch. She is cold. And, you know, last episode, we discussed a bit of our frustration, you and I, Drew, that there appeared to be no particular reason in this society, like in Tavon, that has suddenly and inexplicably decided that women can't work as scribers. Mm-hmm. You know, we were really hoping it was not just an idle sort of pandering sort of political commentary that, in all honesty, in my opinion, seems to be increasing in prevalence with a lot of modern young adult and epic fantasy sci-fi. But thankfully, it seems that Bennett had his reasons, and that it must have been incredibly frustrating for a woman like Estelle with such intelligence and creativity and sheer drive to be just dismissed and, for lack of a better term, imprisoned throughout her life. I mean, this restriction on women in Tavani society turned out to have a direct tie to the identity and the struggles of our hidden antagonist, and it provided the kind of sympathy, or I don't know, justification, if you want to say, for an antagonist that I feel we really, really lacked with her husband, you know, Thomas Ziani.
Okay, so this is where we diverge on Estelle.
Really?
Because, yes, so that, like, denial of access to scribing for women is the motivation behind Estelle.
Yeah.
Right?
Ostensibly,
but we still didn't get any reason for why women are just suddenly banned from scribing.
No, you're right. We didn't get a reason for that. We just...
ultimately,
it was a narrative device. It was just that Bennett needed a reason
and
for
that's
Estelle
a problem.
to be... Really?
That's a problem for me. Because, like, there's no logical explanation for why our ultimate villain here is doing the thing she does, and especially so because she is doing horrific things. And like, just, like, even if there had been a good reason for, like, a good in-world reason, so to speak, for, like, the ostracization of women among the scribers, like, even then, I still would not have bought Estelle's, like, motivations here. Like she's like, oh, my dad didn't believe in me, so I'm gonna murder 10,000 people.
She was a genius in her art, and she was denied the materials she needed to express it.
So she's just gonna murder 10,000 people.
She was trapped.
I don't buy
in
that.
her eyes, she might not see it as murdering. She's trying to absorb them.
She did, because we actually got
at the end,
a point of view from her where she knows what she's doing. But
I'm
so
not saying she's a
her
good person.
explanations. No, but the fact that he writes her as aware of what she's doing, and she tries to rationalize it in the context of this whole "I was denied my right," like, that did not work for me. That did not work for me.
You see, and I understand what you're saying. You're absolutely right in the fact that despite the fact it presented a very, very good, or at least, justification, if she wants to put it that way, for her actions, we still didn't have a concrete reason why this society is as sexist as it is. But I think the fact that she had that motivation, I definitely don't want to say it redeemed her at all, but it gave her a little more dimension than it did. For example, I guess my main reason that I'm kind of arguing, I don't want to say arguing for Estelle, but why I found her so compelling as I did, was simply because of her juxtaposition with her husband. Because he was a character who was also bad, clearly an antagonist, but had no goddamn reason to be as much of an asshole as he was. He had no reason for that. And so I guess comparing the two, I guess with the context, Estelle versus Ziani, I don't know. Sorry, go on.
So Tomas, he is like, we're talking about our ability to insert politically and culturally exigent themes and things. Yes. Tomas is like the corrupt excess CEO of our world today.
Yeah, but that's just so plain though.
Oh yeah, I'm not disputing that.
So
I'm saying again, I thought Tomas and Estelle were both like kind of underwhelming.
No.
That's why I think Ophelia is so much more interesting going forward.
Estelle had so much more reason, even if it's
but there was no reason behind her reason.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's where we diverge. For me, it's enough for a character. At least it makes a character more compelling when they have a reason, regardless as to the validity of that reason. When they still have to rationalize. I mean, Tomas Ziani was just like, hey, everybody, I'm an asshole. Watch me do what assholes do. See, hey, in case you forgot how much of an asshole I am, let me remind you about how much of an asshole I am. He was a one-dimensional character with one purpose, and that was to show how much of an asshole he was. With his wife, she at least had a reason. She was imprisoned by this asshole. She was constricted by society. She was a genius in her art who was denied the materials to express that art. I don't know. With Estelle, I found, like, obviously, terrible person. Her entire reasoning completely corrupt, non-valid, but she was still a more compelling character than her husband was, simply because she had reason despite whether or not it was valid.
See, there I disagree.
Yeah, I can see. I just heard that.
Tomas,
and I went, what the hell am I saying?
So Tomas, we'll bring it back to our first episode, right? The beer I brought was called Avarice.
Okay.
It was this unchecked greed that is representative of the culture of Tavan, and Tomas is the result of that. There was a reason why he is the man he is, and his whole thing. You described.
What was that reason?
Oh, I'm an asshole because it's an inherently corrupt, money-oriented culture, and he is the ultimate representation of somebody raised in that society. There is a reason behind the way he developed as a human being. And now, so you said like, oh, he's just an asshole to be an asshole. I say, no, he's a businessman. And that was driven home where he's like, these creatives, like, oh, all you scrivers are so dumb and out there. Like, no, he's like, I'm all about the bottom line. I'm cold-blooded. I'm going to make money. I'm going to be successful.
Does he also have to be a rapist? Does he also have to be, like, all these other things that have nothing to do with his mercantile efforts and just because of his personality?
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about his motivations. Those aren't his motivations. I'm talking about his motivations
but they're part
versus
of
Estelle's motivations.
Character, I don't know.
I'm talking purely about motivations here. Between Tomas and Estelle. So you think
Tomas and Estelle had equally valid,
I think Tomas had a more valid motivations than Estelle, because at its root,
I could
Estelle,
not disagree with that anymore.
So Estelle, like, had there been a reason for the sexism in Tavan in this culture, yes, her motivations would have been way more.
But because there was no reason, her motivations were
there
not.
was no reason.
Woo!
The only reason for it was Robert Jackson Bennett decided it was going to be this way.
Okay, I think I figured out what we're arguing. I think we're arguing two different things. I think you're arguing about how well written of a character she is. I'm just talking about whether she can be considered good or bad to the reader's moral point of view.
That's not at all what I'm going for.
Okay.
I'm just saying, like...
All right, that makes more sense now. Okay. Oh, shit.
But to tie this all back together, this is why I think Ophelia Dandolo is so much more compelling of a villain, or an antagonist,
she does
than either Tomas or Estelle.
Yeah, no, I will agree that Ophelia still has a more grounded, tangible reason, and that is to protect her son because she's lost her husband. She's lost her other son. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this mystic deific figure appears and offers you the opportunity to turn one of your children immortal.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree with that, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, we pretty much got a lot of my character points about Tomas Zayani out of the way, too.
Let's talk about Orso.
Yeah, okay. Hey, yes! Orso! My man! Orso Ignacio. Okay, so for me, he continued to shine like a gem through the entire second part of our read. He's such a brilliant guy, and he's got such a foul mouth. You know, when he's explaining his idea about twinning the empty box to believe that it holds a lexicon with substitutive definitions, he asked, and he was asked by either Claudia or Giovanni, how are we supposed to do this exactly? And then he just goes, well, you two aren't doing shit, really. I'm doing the hard bit. You know, and little moments like these again and again are what make me really like this guy. What about you?
Okay. So I just got done complaining about the character arcs of Satya and Gregor.
Okay.
Orso
is
the flip side of that.
Yes.
He had the character arc in the second half of this book. He was maybe the biggest redeeming factor in character development over the last, 190 pages of Foundryside.
So agreed. Absolutely.
It was such a deftly done little mystery where he asks Giovanni and Claudia, he's like, how many scrappers do you have? How many are loyal to you? Oh, about a dozen? That's enough. All right, take some of my money. And then you never hear again about what happened. And then it all comes to fruition during the trial at the end where he's just like chilling there in the cage. He's like, yeah, this is a joke.
He's
like you guys don't even know.
Confident. He's just sitting there with his shit-eating grin. He's so
like that was some without spoiling anything. That was some Locke Lamora level manipulation.
No shit. Interesting. Good to know.
Like
going forward.
people who've read Republic of Thieves, the third Gentleman Bastards book, know what I'm talking about there. Like this is some not only brilliant character decision making, but brilliant writing to obscure the goals of these maneuvers. So we see the decisions being made, we know the materials, but we like you'd have to be so astute to figure out where all of these pieces come together. And this is one of those twists that I felt worked in this book. Okay. It was like, it made sense, right? There was so much groundwork laid out early on that, like, yeah, Orso's got tons of money, like, he's rich enough, he has his own, like, friggin' mansion, palatial estate, you know, he's not especially loyal to the Dandolos. He has these ties back to the Condianos. Like he's more dedicated to scriving than anything else, and he's over the course of this book developing all these new technologies that he's like, I could make money off of this, you know, and so it makes sense that at the end he found his own house. Like, like. I don't know, but in effect, dang it, like, I don't want to spoil anything. in effect, the whole scene where he talks to Giovanni and Claudia about the scrappers and says, "I'll give you some of my money. You got to go do this," and we don't know what it is.
Yeah, I thought that was part of the plan with the assault on the mountain. Myself, I was like, what
right?
The heck could this be? Yeah.
But that reminds me forcibly of a key maneuver in Republic of Thieves that Locke pulls off regarding a ship and some ancestral caskets, and that's all I'll say.
Okay. Well, I'll piggyback on that point. Sorry, go. You looked like you wanted to finish that point.
Well, basically, I'm just like, everything that Bennett didn't manage to hit home with other characters and other aspects of this book, he did with Orso's plotline and Orso's character arc. So, like, when I walk out of, this book, so to speak, Orso and Berenice are my favorite characters.
Yeah.
Because they're the two who were most adequately handled, the most compelling going forward. Like, I don't know. I know they're secondary characters here. We barely get any points of view from them, but they were done the best.
Well, I'll say that coming out of episode 1, I feel like I made very clear that Orso Ignacio was hands down my favorite character, and I kind of feel validated in the fact that he got such a great character arc. Now, I'll piggyback off that last point that you just made. With Orso Ignacio, he is a man who you are given a million reasons to hate, and he only gives you a million reasons in return to love. I mean, that's how I feel about Orso Ignacio. He's such like I said earlier in this podcast, like I said, he's such a brilliant guy. He's got such a foul mouth, and he just, to me, he kind of stole every single scene that he was in. And he wasn't in a lot, he wasn't a main character. He was definitely a tertiary character, but he was somebody who I always returned to and said, "Oh yes, I'm gonna get a little more, a little more humor out of this guy." There was a moment, and to piggyback off that last point that you just made about that last kind of political maneuver of his, and I'm quoting from the text here: "Orso grinned deliriously and tapped the side of his head. 'I don't know what it is about mortal panic,' he said, 'but it keeps giving me the best scrumming ideas.'" I thought that was such a winner of a line. And then, of course, we found out in the last pages of the book, this particular idea turned out to be a damned good one, after all. The founding of his own house, Foundryside Limited. His entire demeanor during that last that trial that we got at the end. I loved the ending scene where he's presumably about to be executed, and then he turns it all around on Ophelia Dandolo's head. That whole scene had me grinning like an idiot. It was so satisfying to see someone like Ophelia Dandolo get so salty over it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Her helpless frustration, Drew, her helpless frustration was like a strawberry daiquiri on a hot summer day. I was just sitting there sipping it in like, oh yeah, this is it. This is what I came here for. It was
the one line where she's reading off his sentence and he just interrupts her. He's like, "Let me guess, Harpered?"
Yep.
And she's like, "You were sentenced to death by harpering," and he's just like, rolls his eyes like.
he was a man somehow so in control. It was just. Yeah. Everything about Orso Ignacio, the fact that his character started in the place that it did and ended in the place that it did, what a gem of a character. And going forward, I mean, I still, hands down, my favorite character. My favorite character, hands down.
Nice.
Yeah, so I mean, and since we're just talking about Orso, you want to move on to Berenice?
Yeah, I don't have a ton to say about her, other than that, she is a secondary character, so, there wasn't a ton to do with her. But what there was handled well. She had this established personality, kind of like passivity, but competent. Wow! I'm struggling today, man.
Is it competent?
Competent.
Oh, it was good.
Oh, man. Yeah, so she has this like competence to her that we talked about in the last episode that kind of reminded us of like what was it, Steris from Miss Bernera 2.
Oh yeah, I remember making that connection.
But in this half, it becomes more of a character conflict where it's like she wants to establish a relationship, so she needs to overcome that passivity and make a move, so to speak, because Sanchia sure isn't going to do that. And so we get that. I mean, it was a satisfying mini little character arc that she got. She remained amusing on the page. I was entertained anytime she was in a scene. I think she's set up for bigger and better things going forward with Foundryside Limited, and yeah.
Well, Berenice, and same as you said, I don't really have a ton to talk about with Berenice. I was a little disappointed that we didn't get as much Berenice in the second half, because I did enjoy reading every scene that she was in. But the scenes that she was included in, they did shine as well. And I loved when it was time for her to step up to the plate and construct new definitions for the lexicon and repair the gravity rigs. That was awesome, because it was pretty satisfying to see her straight up tell Orso Ignacio. She was like, "Look, I'm doing this, sir. I'm faster
better
than you are."
you.
Yeah, that's just how it goes. And I also got a good laugh when she disguised her need to inform Sanchia about the dangers. The dangers. Listen to me. About the dangers of the gravity rig, under the kind of disguise of needing to ask her a question. And then once the information was across, she just goes, "I actually don't have a question. I just wanted to tell you this without you immediately panicking."
Yeah.
She stole that whole scene, didn't she?
Yeah, I agree. That was fantastic there. I'm very excited to see where Berenice goes.
Oh yeah, and going forward, I definitely ship Berenice Sanchia. Like that, of course.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Unquestionably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty much everything I had about Berenice.
We don't really have any other major characters left.
Well, I have a few points about Clef and Valyria to make.
Okay. All right.
I'll start with Clef. I just say with Clef, it's really only 1 point, and I want to say poor Clef, really. I started feeling pretty sympathetic when he was starting to get overwhelmed by revelation after revelation about himself. Once the mountain revealed that in the old Gothian language, the word for key was one letter off from wand. And then the mountain starts going on to list a whole slew of suspiciously familiar things that the wand of Crescides was supposedly able to do.
Yep.
And Clef, naturally, he starts to crack. Sanchia's confused. She's asking him about it. She's like, "Did you know that?" And he clearly he's frustrated. He starts yelling at her. He goes, "I don't know, all right, I don't know. That's enough goddamn questions." I think it was enough goddamn speculation, is what he said. And I was really starting to feel for the guy, just to have your whole world kind of like upended on itself like that. This many revelations in that quick of a succession. I really started to pity Clef, and of course seeing his treatment throughout the rest of the book. The final scene there with Sanchia, she managed to speak to the man who was Clef, and my heart broke for that man. I was like, God damn, he just apparently he just got nothing redeeming. He got the shitty end of the stick again and again and again. And I hope going forward, even though I can't see how, that he gets what he deserves, and he gets to be himself and do what he loves. And I don't know. I'm really, really bummed out that he's effectively, for lack of a better word, dead by the end of this book. And
he's for sure coming back, though.
He's got to be, right? Like, he has to be.
Yeah. There's no way that's...
I just don't see him coming back with the memories that he acquired with his relationship with Sanchia and having that bond with somebody. So, I don't know. I'm kind of bummed out for Clef.
Yes, I'll agree with you there.
And my only other character here, Valyria. I want to say that my first... my first impression of Valyria, besides straight up goosebumps, I mean, this bitch gave me the heebie-jeebies, was oh, we've met our first official Hierophant. You know, the way she can play with people's minds and make them think they're awake when they're sleeping, or, you know, vice versa, or, you know, to communicate. That brazen, unblinking stare, I was just like, ugh, creepy. Of course, we find out that she's a construct. She's a creation.
Mm-hmm.
But also, one thing I wanted to ask you, Drew, just personally, the name, Valeria. What'd you think? Just
so
the aesthetic of the name Valeria. What did you think of that?
You're like, you haven't read this yet, but the first thing I think of is Gene Wolfe, Book of the New Sun.
Really?
There is a character named Valeria.
Oh, wow.
That, who is like interestingly important to it. She's not always present, but she has, in her own way, a pretty major impact on the story, especially in Earth of the New Sun, the like the sequel.
Interesting.
The sequel novel, and I couldn't ever really get around that.
Okay. Well.
Yeah, but I will say that opening scene, it was like, oh, awesome, like we got something helping. And then the more she talked, the more I was like, I do not trust her.
Yeah,
I do not trust her. I do not trust her.
That's where
like,
I'm
and
going next.
And I was, again, I feel like this was supposed to be a little bit of a twist at the end with the revelation of what she is. And I was like, no, like that makes total sense. Like, of course that's what her deal is. Like, she's, like, yeah, I don't know. But, and this is maybe my biggest problem with the second half of the book, was that one scene with Sanchia on the table, you know, like latched down, talking with Valeria. There are two things going on in this scene. The conversation with her, where Valeria is, in my mind, clearly more and more and more obviously untrustworthy. And the bonds clearly telling Sanchia it's a password.
Okay.
And it took Sanchia so friggin' long to figure out that it wasn't like breathing on the thing.
Do you think it took
like,
Sanchia so long, perhaps because Bennett needed that one moment of boom when the climax
yes,
hit? Yeah, I think
that's
I agree
exactly
with that.
it. Yeah, and so this is like going to the core of my issues with this book, is that there are things that happen for no really good reason, except the author wanted it to happen.
Yeah, or the author needed it to happen. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that.
So, and you know, this goes back to my argument about Estelle's motivations. This goes to this scene, again, tying to Estelle. If Sanchia was even remotely intelligent for like this 5-minute span, she would have figured out right away, oh, it's, of course, like, it's breath, but not exactly breath. And there are like all these other things tying. It's like, oh, duh, you have to talk a word at it. Like,
well,
duh, you know, and so that needed to happen so that Estelle could come in and do her, like, you know, burrowing metallic worm thing and kill all the guys and have this, like, gravity plate horrific death for Tomas. Like it was very obvious, the moments in this book where Bennett was like, I want this to happen, but it wouldn't happen unless I fiddle with things.
Huh. Well, I mean, well, sorry, were you done your point there? Can I continue?
Yeah, I'm done.
Sweet. So, I'll start off by saying that what I started with, you know, asking you specifically about the aesthetic of the name Valeria. You know, to me, it was very, I want to say cliche, maybe a little on the side of cringy, and that's just because I was thinking about A Song of Ice and Fire. Valeria, Valyrian steel. Granted, it's spelled slightly different. In
oh
Song
yeah,
of Ice
I
and
was
Fire,
going to say I never even thought of that.
But, you know, it just, to me, it kind of feels like a pretty standard kind of epic fantasy. I need a cool sounding name, Valyrian, you know.
Can I?
No, go ahead, dude.
Did you listen to the audiobook for that scene?
In Foundryside? No, I didn't.
So I pronounce that Valeria.
Valeria. Not
Valyria.
Yeah, which is very, very similar, but I see how you're distinguishing the E from the Y.
So I never at all associated like old Valyria in A Song of Ice and Fire.
See, to me, the E is kind of interchangeable with the Y depending on like the context. I don't know. I could not stop thinking of Valyrian Steel while I was reading her name, Valeria, and I was like, I don't know. But again, I mean, I myself have only read book 1 and 2 of A Song of Ice and Fire. I mean, I don't, you know, that's just kind of a quick impression that I had, and it kept reminding me of it. But I don't know. That's just one thing that I could not get out of my head as I was reading Valeria's character. Sorry, listen to me doing it again. Valeria. I don't know. But there was another moment that I want to draw to the forefront here when Valeria explains to Sanchia that she can turn off her abilities, as well as, you know, how to resist the Imperiad. You know, in that moment, as I mentioned earlier in this podcast, I started to trust her, despite my ever-increasing frustration with the continued lectures on the lore. But when she said, and I quote, when she said, "And will you unlock my casings?" confirmed, I stopped and I went, wait, hang on, hold up. Back up just a sec, Sanchia. Maybe we should think about this. But I suppose, you know, looking at it in hindsight, Sanchia didn't really have much of a choice. Eh?
She didn't, but still, like, she should have known.
And I think that's a point in Bennett's favor. I mean, if Sanchia had been in any state besides absolute desperation and blundered on ahead, I would have resented her for that, because it was pretty clear that Valeria is something that you should probably consider before you release it. But I think Bennett managed to place her in a situation where she had absolutely no choice. So I forgave him for it.
So my only issue with that is that it wasn't until much later that Sanchia released Valeria.
Yeah. Well, that was like literally the whole climax of the book. That was the point. That's what Sanchia had infiltrated
but
the
in that
to do.
moment, like she had plenty of time to consider that interaction and realize, like, maybe she's not totally trustworthy. But
what other choice did she have?
That.
She needed to stop Estelle.
No, I'm not saying that she had another choice. I'm saying she didn't even, like, consider that Valeria could be antagonistic.
She didn't realize that this was the lesser of two evils. She just thought it was... Yeah, okay. I can see that.
Yeah. Like... And, I don't know, maybe I'm giving Sanchia too much credit. Maybe I'm giving, like, a slave girl turned street urchin
Yeah, I think thief. Context to the scene of what was happening kind of is really important here. She couldn't stop and think about this logically.
Like, she's not educated. She's not, like, you know, a big thinker or anything. So, you know, maybe, like, there's somebody who just would not have put that together. But I just want to, like... finish, since we're on, like, Valyria and the Occidentals.
Sure,
that, yeah. I want to finish on this revelation at the end of the book of the Dark Prophet, right? You know, the probably Grisides, the moth guy, whatever you want to call it.
A point that I was going to say after this about that
he
guy.
was, again, not surprising to me.
Okay.
The moths, I thought, were so heavy-handed.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Every
the way
single time
they appeared in every scene that Ophelia was in. Yeah.
Yeah, like it was no surprise at all to me that they were, like, controlled or part of some malevolent entity.
They were more than just moths.
Yeah, like it wasn't like, oh, Campo Dandolo has a moth infestation. I was like,
he definitely
of
didn't
course
handle
that's
it
not
as
the case.
Subtly as Brandon Sanderson handled the things, or some
very
specific
to say
no
more of that. To say no more of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll bleep those out.
Yeah, we'll bleep that out. No problem.
But yeah, it was still cool to see that at the end. I'm excited to see where that plot line goes. As I said, I mean, Ophelia is really compelling to me going forward. Because she has like a really emotionally based motivation, and that makes her very open to manipulation from this, presumably
Interesting.
Occidental entity.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's my last character thought. But do we want to talk about just like overall like impression?
Yeah.
ratings?
I have a couple of miscellaneous points I want to get out of the way. A couple of predictions I want to official predictions
Yeah.
I want to get out of the way, and then I'll have my conclusion here. I want to say I was blown away by the scene where the mountain started talking to Sanchia. I mean, that revelation came unexpectedly and eerily to me personally. I mean, I realized the mountain would probably, as Orso Ignacio said earlier, it would probably be on to Sanchia eventually, and I figured she would just start coming across locked doors. She would start coming across obstacles. I didn't expect that the mountain would have a personality and that it would actually directly speak to her, and it would be so soon into her, heist, for lack of a better word. So
Yeah.
I thought that was handled very well. It was very eerie, very unexpected, as I said. Gave me chills. So excellent scene, that one. And I want to draw back to an earlier discussion, Drew, you and I had about during our episodes about the Rune Lords. Actually.
Oh.
And this is particularly during our Layer of Bones episode. I admitted in that episode that I usually get so hooked by the idea of deeper secrets, further lore, and that I can often get impatient with the current narrative and what's happening, in the now. But in this book, in Foundryside, I found a book that completely flipped that on its head for me. And I want to say that I think this book has way too much lore for a volume of its size. There were points that I got lost. I didn't care. We kept getting our narrative interrupted for several long-winded explanations of the overly complicated history, as well as the convoluted magic system that resulted from such. And, I had been barely following along, having to stop the audiobook and repeat passages several times, and I don't rightly remember if I mentioned so last episode, but right now, with the text in front of me, it was about halfway through the first scene with Valyria, where I actually stopped to write down this complaint. That I thought everything was a little too convoluted. It was just too long-winded. There were times where we got a pause in the action for this 5-paragraph explanation, this 2 or 3 page explanation about the magic system, and I don't know. I felt that there was just way too much lore in this book, and for 3 books, I just didn't think it was justified. I spent so much time confused that it kind of took a little bit away from the book. For me.
Well, yeah,
So-
I mean, I think that's fair. I don't know if I would fully agree with that,
Sure,
but
sure.
I will say that ties into my issues with how convoluted things got and how many different twists and turns there were, and
Yeah.
and how he didn't really have the right amount of room to adequately develop
Yeah. And
to
Sorry,
build
go
a
ahead.
foundation for that. And that brings me to my ultimate rating. I gave this 4 stars on Goodreads. More properly, I'd say maybe a 3.75.
Sure.
It's got a lot of good things going for it. It's fun. There's some extra cool scenes. You go back to Sanderson's zeroth law, err on the side of awesome. There's a
Yep.
lot of erring on the side of awesome.
There is.
Especially in the second half of this book. But there are real narrative and character issues at hand here, where things either were artificially cut short or left undone or just weren't developed adequately, that it keeps what should have been maybe one of my favorite books of this year from being even in the conversation.
Sure. Sure. And I will reiterate with my point, my few complaints there about the convoluted history, the magic system, and the way it has to be over-explained by its own nature. It has to be over-explained for you to understand it. I will say, I reiterate, that this could have been a result of the simple fact that the first half I read on audiobook, the second half I read with the text, and it could have been just the fact that I was at work and had to keep rewinding, sections that might have led to my overall kind of lack of comprehension and my kind of frustration with how much lore that we got, because for me it didn't make a whole lot of sense, and just kept being there were more and more caveats here and there were more and more additional info here and there, and there was I really couldn't follow, or as a result didn't really care too much about the overall lore and the history in this book with the Hierophants and the Occidentals. I don't know, to them they kind of represent to me this faceless struggle that I still don't even have much more than a glimpse of. So I don't know.
Okay.
And again, a few of the last things I have, just a couple predictions to make. The original prediction I made actually about that kind of figure that's wrapped in black cloth like a mummified corpse, the form made of fluttering moths. I didn't immediately draw the correlation to Chrysides the Great. I thought definitely a Hierophant, but perhaps like a truly evil one. Maybe there was a threat that the Hierophants were fighting before they vanished. They were consumed by their own creations. So I thought maybe there's a little more insidious thing to be considered there with that figure.
See, I would say that Chrysides, everything we learned about him throughout this book, makes him pretty insidious.
Yeah, I mean, that could be it. That could be the answer right there. The fact that Chrysides the Great was not who we thought he was.
Yeah.
I think we still have more revelations about the nature of Tribuno Condiano's supposed madness and the charge with which he gave the mountain, find Hierophants. And I think to wrap that up, Valyria is clearly going to cause a huge ruckus, and I feel she might come in handy in the struggle against whatever the heck that dark figure that Ophelia Dandolo apparently serves might be.
Oh, definitely.
So,
yeah.
And as a conclusion, my overall impressions of the quality of this book, all in all, I found it to be pretty enjoyable. It was an enjoyable read, but I wouldn't put it in the top tier of books that we've already covered, and I think it still has, that said, I think it still has a lot of promise with the series going forward. I felt that, and as I mentioned last episode, the magic system, pretty cliche. The lore, as I said in this episode, incredibly long-winded, confusing. Mysteries so convoluted they were difficult to keep track of. But I think this book definitely left off feeling unfinished. There's clearly a lot more going to happen with the next volume, and I do look forward to covering that on the Inking Out Loud podcast when it does. I definitely want to check that out. But as it currently stands, if I were to rate the book on an arbitrary scale of... I wrote down an arbitrary scale of 10, based solely on my own enjoyment, I would rate it a 7.5. So by your scale of 5, I would say 3.75. That's exactly the same. I enjoyed it. I will say this: I enjoyed it about as much as I enjoyed Arkady Martine's A Memory Called Empire, which we just finished covering. But hold on, for vastly different reasons. Different reasons.
Oh man,
Arkady
A
Martine
Memory Called Empire. That's a straight 5-star from me. So.
Arkady Martine's, her as a wordsmith, she is a genius. She absolutely is. But I felt like nothing happened in that book until the very end. So I don't know. I
disagree so much. Anyway, if you want to hear why we disagree on that, go back and listen to our Memory Called Empire episodes.
Yep.
But yeah, I think
that's everything I have.
A good wrap. Shall we head into the final draft?
Heck yes, we should head into the final draft. I'll even start us off, man.
Yeah, what do you got?
So what I got with me today is something that I'm not sure if I've brought onto this podcast before. If I did, it would have been in the first episode for my birthday. And that would be, I finally brought another scotch to the podcast. This is a drink that I cannot get enough of. And this is my favorite scotch, by the way. What I have here is a Glenfiddich 12-year aged single malt scotch. It's the same thing. Whiskey, scotch is a type of whiskey, yeah. As far as scotches go, it's pretty modestly priced. It's only a $60 bottle. But what I really appreciate about this Scotch is the amount of, as a Scotch, you expect a kind of smokiness and earthiness, a kind of peaty sort of deep bitter. I don't want to call it bitter taste, but there's a lot of fruitiness in this Glenfiddich as well. The Glenfiddich 12, it comes in a green bottle. I don't think it matters where you are. But that Scotch, add like 3/4 Scotch, 1/4 water. That's your ratio. That's how I have it here. It's got just such a nice, I'll call it a spicy, fruity taste to it that I cannot get enough of. This is hands down my favorite. Well, I was going to say liquor, but this is my favorite booze in the world right here. If you're going to get me like a gift, you want to get Rob something that he loves, the Glenfiddich 12. I mean, there's nothing that really, in my books, matches that liquor right there.
So I'm not 100% on this. I'm not like the Scotch connoisseur that I am with beer, but
I wouldn't call myself a connoisseur either. It's just my preferred liquor.
I'm pretty sure. Well, so I'm enough of a Scotch drinker that I know there are different like regions in Scotland that produce pretty substantially different flavor profiles.
Yep.
And the like smoky, salty kind of, that's like the Islay Scotch, and then you'll get like Lowland Scotch, which is like the really peaty, like you can taste the dinosaur decomposing in the bottom of the peat pit. And then there's Speyside and Highland, and Speyside I think is what Glenfiddich is, and Speyside Scotches tend to be more like floral and fruity and citrusy.
I've got it right here. Glenfiddich single malt Scotch whiskey, independent of our signature single malt. It's pioneer of the single malt category, uniquely married. I don't know why I thought that was balanced. I read a wholly different word. In oak tons for a beautifully complex nose and refreshingly complex flavor. It doesn't mention what exact kind of Scotch it is, unless it does on the back.
Okay. I just looked it up. It is a Speyside whiskey.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And that is my favorite region. Like,
it is such a good
I'm not a huge fan of, like, the really peaty or smoky Scotches.
Splash of water makes a beautiful sipper.
Yeah. But anyway, Glenfiddich 12, I've had it before. It is very tasty.
Yes. Now, so yeah, that's about it for the Glenfiddich 12. Drew, my dude, what are you drinking, man?
So, I have to apologize.
Uh-oh.
Last week, I talked a big game, and I did my best. I tried to swing a trade for this beer. I was not able to get it. I'll tell you what it was, though.
Yeah, no, I definitely
I live in Colorado, which makes this trade like more doable, but I just like couldn't close it in time. So there's a brewery up in the mountains south of me in Fort Collins called Casey Brewing and Blenders, and they do, I mean, without any exaggeration, some of the best farmhouse ales and saisons in the world. Like the stuff they're producing is out of this world good. They have two like fairly accessible. I say fairly accessible. They don't distribute. Like you either get this like on tap at a place that, like a craft bar that got a barrel in or whatever, or else you went to the brewery and like bought a bottle. So they have a funky blender and the Casey Family Preserves. And then they have a blend version of those two called One Key.
Are you serious?
Yeah, and I tried so hard to close a trade on this thing, but I couldn't pull it off.
I would have facepalmed so hard if you had actually brought that to the podcast. Yeah, that's perfect.
And what makes it worse is that last weekend I was at the WeldWorks Invitational Festival. I think I mentioned that.
Yeah, you had mentioned.
And Casey was at the WeldWorks Festival and brought two different variants of One Key, so I had it there. But
you've had the One Key, so how did it be?
Yes.
How was it?
Oh my God, it was so good.
Yeah.
I had two variants of it. One of them was like raspberry, blackberry, and cherry, and then one of them was just the blackberry. The triple fruited one was, there was like a little too much going on with the fruit, but just the straight blackberry one was phenomenal. I mean,
nice.
And so when I say, like, you know, farmhouse ale saison, you know, this is like tart, you know, I'm blanking. Wow, apparently I've had a lot of. I'll tell you this: like, I've had a large bottle of the beer I brought today, and it's 11.6%.
Yeah.
And I came from brunch before this, where I had like 4 mimosas, so I'm a little struggling right now.
I want to say that, and this is something I forgot to mention with mine. That, I mean, with my Glenfiddich 12, for those who can't tell by my slurring of my words, I've had a substantial amount of that one during the course of this podcast. Honestly, if I were to try to quantify it, looking at this glass, I would say 7 shots, 8 shots.
Oh my God! Oh, you drank way more than I did.
Let's see. This, I'm showing you the glass right here, Drew. You see where it starts to get wide right there? I had about 3 of these, and then some.
Oh yeah, you're at like 6 or 7 shots.
Easily. Yeah.
Anyway, the beer I brought though.
The beer you did bring. Yes, let's get into that.
I'm drinking a beer from Funkworks in Fort Collins, Colorado. Another brewery known for their saisons, their farmhouse ales. Although this is not one of those. I am drinking an 11.6% barrel-aged Belgian Dark Ale.
Belgian Dark.
Brewed with cacao nibs. And chocolate.
Okay, I had no what the hell that was. Okay.
I mean, like,
for those who can't see, which is everybody, I had a really confused face there. Drew just saw it.
Just call it chocolate. Go with that. But anyway, this is like, I mean, it's very boozy, very strong. It's got that like kind of like sharp Belgian quad kind of character to it.
Okay, yeah.
There's a good amount of that, you know, like cocoa on the nose. I don't know. It's good. It's a solid beer, but it is called Dark Prophet.
Oh, fuck off. It's not called that. Are you serious? Show me the bottle. You son of a bitch. It is actually called Dark Prophet. Holy crap. I mean,
so
that's
I couldn't
kind
do
of
one
even
key.
better than one key. I mean,
I don't think it's better than one key.
No, I think it is better than one key because Clef is not the only key in Tavon.
Oh, but he's the one key.
I don't know. But
yeah.
Damn, that was, I think honestly it was a damn good effort. That was good. Nice.
Yeah, that was my backup plan.
I almost brought a beer from Collective Arts Brewing Company, which I've actually featured on this podcast
you have.
before.
Yeah.
How the hell do you remember that? I saw the recognition in your eyes when you said that. How do you remember that, Drew?
Oh, it was only a couple episodes ago, right?
Oh, that's true. You would have had to write down the YouTube bit. By the way, I have episode 21 on YouTube. It's uploaded. I uploaded it myself. So that's live now. Forgot to tell you that. I'm telling you right now, live on the podcast, everybody. But yeah, I almost had another one. Actually, I'm not going to say the name of it because I may bring it to the next one. It's kind of a weakly involved name. It's like it's kind of a pun. Not a pun. It's a bit of wordplay, but it kind of works for any book. So I'll save it probably for next podcast.
I'll tell you right now. We're going into the Wheel of Time after this.
Yeah, we are.
I'm scared. Like, I have no clue what beers I'm going to be bringing.
And this is something that for the Wheel of Time for both of us is such a big deal for us to start finally. Episode 27 is going to be our first Wheel of Time episode, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Oh my God! To me, 27's. I'll explain it later.
But yeah, so on that note, this has been episode 26
of
the Geeking Out Loud podcast, and next up we are doing the first part of The Eye of the World, first book of the Wheel of Time. We will be reading up through the chapter called Wolf Brother. This is essentially...
I'm so excited to start the Wheel of Time. Sorry, I couldn't contain it anymore while you were talking.
This is covering the content of From the Two Rivers, which is back in 2001, Tor's, at the time, YA fantasy imprint called Starscape released Eye of the World and The Great Hunt as like YA version split in half.
Yeah.
And From the Two Rivers and To the Blight are the Wheel of Time volumes. So we will be covering the content of From the Two Rivers. This includes The Eye of the World up through Wolf Brother, but more importantly, it includes the new prologue Robert Jordan wrote, titled Ravens. So if you don't own From the Two Rivers, you haven't heard of this before, Google it. You can find the text of it online. This is a fairly short, a little scene from Egwene's point of view as a 9-year-old girl in the Two Rivers, and it is very interesting. It gives us even more insight into her character, and we will definitely be discussing this at length. So
at length.
Yeah, if you don't own From the Two Rivers, or you're not familiar with this prologue, check it out before you come and listen to our episode next week.
And I'll say, Drew and I love the Wheel of Time, so hang on to your asses, everyone. These next episodes that are coming are going to be something wild.
And the other, kind of side of that is, while we're covering the content of From the Two Rivers, we're going to be doing a little bit of an intro to the Wheel of Time and our relationships to the series. We're going to have a couple of special guests on. As we go through the Wheel of Time in its entirety, we're going to have many different special guests, including some people whose names you'll probably recognize. But yeah, we're planning some pretty fun stuff for our reread of Robert Jordan's just magnum opus.
God
and
damn ready for this.
Yeah, and so that'll be starting up next week. If you want early access to it, as you're listening to this episode, if you check out our Patreon, we have a tier that will give you early access to episodes. We have a couple other tiers with fun benefits, so check that out. We're using that just to support our sound engineer and our artist, who's going to be developing some pretty fun thumbnails for the Wheel of Time series as we go on here. So as always, though, I am your host, Drew McCaffrey, and with me is my co-host, Rob Santos.
Yo!
And we appreciate your support, we appreciate your engagement, and we're looking forward to having you on for our Wheel of Time read.
Sounds good. All right. Peace out, everybody.
Catch you next time.
Bye!